The massive warship called Eternal Conquest moved through the darkness of space like a predator hunting for prey. Commander stood on the bridge and watched the blue planet grow larger in the viewport. His species that had conquered 17 worlds across 3 star systems, they had never failed, they had never retreated, they had never known defeat. His mandibles clicked together with satisfaction as he studied the primitive world before him. The planet showed weak electromagnetic signatures and simple radio waves that told him this civilization had barely discovered technology. They were children playing with toys while they commanded the stars. His science officer approached with a data pad. The readings showed large population centers, basic infrastructure, and no orbital worth mentioning. It would be an easy conquest, another world added to the empire, another species brought under control. Gave the order without hesitation: begin orbital bombardment of their major cities, disable their primitive infrastructure. Landing forces would deploy within the cycle, standard protocols for a standard conquest. The first plasma strikes descended toward the planet's surface. They targeted the dense urban regions that they had identified as command centers. Expected to see panic spreading across the planet. He expected desperate radio signals begging for mercy. He expected surrender within hours. What he received instead was silence. Then something impossible happened. The planet fired back. Deep inside a mountain in a place called Colorado, Lieutenant Commander Kyle was drinking coffee and running his morning briefing when every screen in the facility exploded with alerts. His coffee cup shattered on the floor, but he did not notice. He was already running for the communications console. Kyle had spent 20 years in the military. He had trained for every possible scenario: nuclear war, terrorist attacks, natural disasters, but nothing had prepared him for the words he was about to speak. This is not a drill. We have confirmed hostile contact. Unknown origin. Repeat, unknown origin. The message spread across the planet like wildfire. Within 14 minutes, every nuclear-armed nation on Earth had been contacted. Leaders who had spent decades threatening each other now spoke on secure lines. The American president talked directly with the Russian one. The Chinese premier joined the call. Old enemies became instant allies because they faced something none of them had ever imagined. In military bases around the world, soldiers scrambled to their stations. Fighter jets roared into the sky. Submarines dove deep and prepared their weapons. Missile silos opened their doors. Humanity had spent centuries to fight each other. Now they would learn if those preparations could save them from something far worse. The first wave of landing craft descended through Earth's atmosphere. The alien pilots expected minimal resistance. They expected primitive aircraft that would fall easily to their plasma weapons. They expected ground forces armed with simple projectile weapons that could not pierce armor. They found NATO jets flying in perfect formation with Russian interceptors. They found Chinese fighters coordinating attacks with American bombers. They found a planet that had united in minutes to face a common enemy. Commander watched his tactical display and felt something he had not experienced in decades: confusion. The primitives were not surrendering. They were fighting back with weapons that should not exist on a world at their technological level. Missiles tracked his ships with impossible accuracy. Projectile weapons punched through armor that had stopped plasma fire from advanced civilizations. But something else disturbed him even more. The humans were communicating than his translators could process. They shared information across their entire planet in real time. They adapted to tactics within minutes of first contact. When one strategy failed, they tried another. When one unit fell, another took its place. Turned to and demanded an explanation. What manner of species was this? Worked his console with trembling appendages. He reviewed the incoming data 3 times because he could not believe what it showed. Then he looked at his commander with something that might have been fear. "Commander, I believe we have made a critical error. This species has been at war with themselves for their entire recorded history. They have never known peace, not for a single generation. They fight each other constantly over resources, over territory, over ideas. They have developed weapons capable of destroying their entire planet many times over. Process this information slowly. That is madness. No species could survive such constant conflict." They did not just survive, Commander, they thrived. Each war made them stronger. Each conflict taught them new ways to kill. They have perfected the art of destruction over thousands of years. We are facing a species that considers warfare a natural state of existence. On the surface of Earth, the battle raged across every continent. Ground forces advanced from their landing zones expecting easy victory. They found cities that had transformed into fortresses within hours. They found civilians picking up weapons and fighting alongside soldiers. They found a species that refused to accept defeat. In New York, a column pushed through the streets toward a strategic bridge. They had advanced 3 blocks when the buildings on both sides erupted with gunfire. Humans fired from windows, from rooftops, from holes in the walls. They returned fire with plasma weapons, but there were too many targets, too many angles of attack. The column commander ordered a retreat. It was the first time in his career he had given such an order. He had conquered cities on 5 different worlds. He had never faced resistance like this. Similar scenes played out around the globe. In Moscow, soldiers found themselves lost in a maze of subway tunnels where humans ambushed them from the darkness. In Tokyo, alien landing craft were shot down by anti-aircraft batteries that the humans had somehow coordinated in minutes. In Cairo, a base was overrun by soldiers from 12 different nations fighting as a single unit. Aboard the Eternal Conquest, Commander realized that his easy conquest had become something else entirely. The primitive world was not falling. The inferior species was not surrendering. Instead, the humans were learning. They were adapting. They were getting stronger with every engagement. Approached with a new report, his voice was quiet. Commander, I have analyzed their historical records. These humans have fought over 200 major wars in their recorded history. They have killed each other by the millions. They have developed chemical weapons, biological weapons, nuclear weapons. They have practiced the art of killing each other for so long that it has become part of their very nature. Stared at the blue planet on his screen, the planet that should have been an easy conquest, the planet that was now costing him soldiers by the thousands. We have invaded a world of warriors, he said. No, Commander shook his head slowly. We have invaded a world that has never stopped for war. We are simply the first enemy they have faced that they did not create themselves, and I fear they have been waiting for us their entire existence. 72 hours into the invasion, Commander had lost 1/3 of his landing force. 2 escort vessels had been destroyed by weapons that his species had considered obsolete for centuries. His fleet had conquered civilizations with than light travel and energy shields, yet these primitives with their chemical rockets and nuclear bombs were proving to be the most difficult enemy they had ever faced. The humans were not just fighting, they were learning. Every captured weapon was taken apart and studied. Every dead soldier was examined by their scientists. Every battle taught them something new about their enemy, and they shared this knowledge instantly across their entire planet. Deep beneath the Pentagon, Dr. Hayes worked without sleep in a makeshift laboratory. She was who had spent her entire career studying theoretical alien life. She had written papers about what extraterrestrial species might look like. She had given lectures about how first contact might happen. Now she stood over the body of an actual alien creature, and the fate of her species depended on what she could learn. Spoke into a recorder as she worked. Their exoskeletons are calcium-based, vulnerable to sustained kinetic impact. Their respiratory systems require a specific nitrogen-oxygen mixture that is slightly different from our atmosphere. Extended exposure to our air causes them fatigue. Their visual spectrum is narrower than ours. They cannot see infrared light. She paused and looked at the alien body before her. It was strange to feel pity for a creature that had come to conquer her world, but she was a scientist first. She observed without. Their neural pathways are slower than human ones. They process information at roughly 70% of our speed. This explains why they rely so heavily on technology. Their bodies cannot match their machines. General Webb stood in the doorway listening. He was a hard man who had commanded forces in 3 wars. He had seen death and destruction on scales that would break most people, but nothing had prepared him for this. Nothing had prepared anyone for this. What can we use? He asked. Turn to face him. Everything. Night vision gives us an advantage because they cannot see in darkness the way we can. Their weapons are plasma-based and extremely effective at range, but their cooling systems are inefficient. If we force them into prolonged engagements, their weapons overheat and become useless. Their armor is strong against energy weapons but vulnerable to sustained physical impact. Our bullets work better than their own plasma fire against them. General Webb absorbed this information with cold efficiency. Within hours, it was distributed to every military force on Earth. Soldiers began adapting their tactics immediately. They attacked at night. They drew out firefights until weapons failed. They aimed for the same spots on alien armor again and again until it cracked. Aboard the Eternal Conquest, received increasingly alarming reports. An armored column in Eastern Europe had been ambushed by irregular forces. The humans had hidden explosive devices beneath roads and detonated them as vehicles passed. A landing zone in Asia had been overrun by human soldiers who had somehow learned to identify and target communication relays. Without communications, the aliens could not coordinate. Without coordination, they fell. Approached with another report, his movements were nervous, his voice trembled. They are learning than any species we have encountered. They reverse engineer our technology within days of it. Their engineers have already begun adapting our plasma frequency to their own weapon platforms. Within a week, They will have weapons that combine our technology with theirs. Studied the holographic display of Earth. It was covered with thousands of engagement markers, red for positions, blue for human resistance. There was far more blue than there should have been. How is this possible? He demanded. Our projections indicated that tribal divisions would prevent unified resistance. They were supposed to fight each other while we conquered them one group at a time. Shook his head slowly. Commander, we misunderstood them completely. Their divisions are real, but they are also temporary. When faced with an external threat, they unite instantly. They have done this many times in their history. They call it putting aside differences. They stop fighting each other and focus all their aggression on the outside enemy, and then they become something terrifying. On the ground in the city of Denver, Colorado, Sergeant led her squad through the ruins of what had once been a shopping center. They had established a forward operating base nearby. Her mission was simple: find out how many aliens were there, identify their weapons, report back. Had lost 2 soldiers in the first week of the invasion, good people with families waiting for them. She remembered their faces every night before she fell asleep. She used that memory as fuel now. Grief became determination, loss became purpose. Her scout whispered through the radio, "Contact ahead, 200 meters, 6 hostiles on patrol." Raised her rifle. It had been modified with thermal optics that exploited the visual weakness. In the green glow of her scope, she could see the alien sentries standing in the darkness, completely unaware. They could not see her. They could not see any of her squad. To them, the night was empty. "Mark targets," she ordered quietly, "on my signal." The ambush lasted 11 seconds. 6 fell before the others even knew they were under attack. By the time reinforcements arrived and her squad had vanished into the urban maze, they carried captured equipment that would be on Dr. Hayes' laboratory table within the hour. This was how humanity fought, not with or ceremony, not with rules or traditions. They fought with ruthless efficiency born from thousands of years of practice. They struck from shadows, disappeared before retaliation, and returned stronger each time. Watched another section of his tactical display turn blue, another position lost, another unit destroyed. "They do not fight like any species we have conquered," he said quietly. "They fight like predators." Slowly, "Commander, I have studied their military history extensively now. They have a saying, 'All is fair in love and war.' They do not believe in combat. They believe in victory at any cost. They use deception, ambush, sabotage, assassination. They poison water supplies. They destroy food stores. They attack medical facilities. Nothing is forbidden to them if it leads to victory." "That is barbaric." "Yes, Commander, it is, and it is why they are winning." The invasion was supposed to take 3 days. It had been 3 days, and they controlled less territory than they had in the first hour. The humans had not just stopped their advance, they had reversed it, and with every passing hour they grew stronger while they grew weaker. In a bunker somewhere in Russia, generals studied the same tactical displays that watched from orbit, but where the alien commander saw disaster, saw opportunity. "They are stretched thin," he said to the other commanders gathered around him. "Their supply lines are long. Their reinforcements are far away. If we coordinate a major offensive, we can break their ground forces completely." The American general beside him, "We have been studying their communication patterns. We can jam their signals at the right moment, cut them off from their fleet, then we hit them from all sides at once." Smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. For centuries, humans had prepared to fight each other with exactly these tactics. Now they would use those preparations against a common enemy. They had come to Earth expecting easy prey. They had found something very different. They had found a species that had been practicing for this moment since the dawn of their civilization, and that species was just getting started. 1 month into the invasion, Commander made the decision that would define the war. His forces were dying by the thousands. His positions were falling across every continent. The easy conquest had become a nightmare that grew worse with each passing day. He stood before the tactical display and gave an order that no commander had given in centuries: deploy the strategic reserves, bring out the weapons that were meant for advanced civilizations, the weapons that had been considered unnecessary against primitives. Orbital bombardment platforms moved into position above the planet. Kinetic weapons capable of striking with the force of nuclear explosions powered up their targeting systems. Biological agents designed to kill carbon-based life forms were loaded into delivery systems. The Empire had not used such weapons in generations. Most conquered species surrendered long before they became necessary. But the humans had not surrendered. They had not even considered it. Pointed at the holographic display, target their major food production regions, destroy their agricultural centers. If we cannot defeat them in battle, we will starve them into submission. The first kinetic strikes fell across the American Midwest. Massive rods of metal dropped from orbit and struck the ground at incredible speeds. The impact created craters where farms had stood. Millions of acres of wheat and corn vanished in seconds. More strikes hit the Ukrainian steppes, then the Chinese plains, then the rice paddies of Southeast Asia. Watch the destruction with grim satisfaction. Without food, the humans would have no choice but to surrender. But even as the kinetic weapons fell, something was happening beneath the oceans of Earth, something they had not anticipated. Vice Admiral Christopher Boyd commanded the USS, a nuclear submarine that had been patrolling the Pacific Ocean when the invasion began. For weeks, he had waited in the deep water while his world burned above him. He had listened to reports of cities destroyed and soldiers killed. He had felt helpless in a way that no military commander should ever feel. Now his orders had finally arrived. The scientists had done their work. They had analyzed ship signatures and identified weaknesses in their orbital positions. They had modified human nuclear warheads to exploit those weaknesses. All that remained was to pull the trigger. Boyd looked at his crew, good men and women who had trained their entire lives for a moment like this. They had expected to fight other humans if war ever came. Instead, they would be the first to strike back against an alien empire. Launch authorization confirmed, his executive officer reported. Boyd studied the firing solution on his screen. The mathematics were perfect. The trajectory was clear. The warheads would detonate against ships before the aliens could react. "May God forgive us," he said quietly, then louder for his crew to hear, "Fire." 12 missiles rose from the ocean and arced towards space. They climbed through the atmosphere on trails of fire. The point systems detected them immediately but struggled to track the primitive projectiles. Their systems were designed to counter plasma weapons and energy beams. They were not designed for simple rockets powered by chemical fuel. 4 warheads detonated against the hull of a destroyer called the Relentless. The nuclear explosions vaporized the ship instantly. 8,000 soldiers died in a flash of light brighter than the sun. Commander stared at the debris field where the Relentless had been. He could not process what he was seeing. A warship destroyed by a species they were conquering. It had never happened in the history of their empire. It was supposed to be impossible. But the humans were just beginning. Across the planet, other submarines launched their weapons. Russian missiles rose from the Arctic Ocean. Chinese missiles climbed from the South Pacific. British and French missiles arced up from the Atlantic. The combined nuclear arsenals that humanity had built to destroy each other now turned toward a common enemy. The fleet had arrived with 37 warships. By the end of that day, they had lost 8. Approached Commander with trembling appendages. His report was devastating. "Commander, I have completed my analysis. If we continue this engagement at current loss rates, our fleet will be combat ineffective within 6 of their months. We cannot sustain these casualties. We must consider withdrawal." Withdrawal's mandibles clicked with rage. The do not retreat from primitives. "Commander, with respect, these are not primitives. These are the most dangerous species we have ever encountered." His voice was steady despite his fear. "They have spent their entire existence for extinction. They built weapons to destroy themselves and created systems to ensure those weapons could be launched even after their leadership was eliminated. They call it mutually assured destruction. Processed this slowly, they created weapons to guarantee their own extinction." "Yes, Commander, and they did so as a deterrent against each other. Every major nation on this planet has enough nuclear weapons to kill their species several times over. They have lived under this threat for generations. They consider planetary annihilation an acceptable strategic option." In Geneva, Switzerland, the Unified Human Command Structure held an emergency meeting. Representatives from every major nation sat around a table that weeks ago would have hosted arguments about trade and borders. Now they discussed the survival of their species. General Webb stood before them with a tactical display. "The orbital strikes are accelerating. They are targeting our food production systematically. If we do not respond decisively, we face global famine within the year." Dr. Hayes rose from her seat. "We have made breakthroughs in understanding their technology. Their ships use a crystalline power matrix that is vulnerable to specific electromagnetic frequencies. We can disable their vessels, but we need to get close enough to deploy the countermeasures." President Morris of the United States spoke calmly. "What exactly are you proposing, Dr. Hayes?" "A coordinated strike against their command ship. Take out their leadership and their fleet loses cohesion. Our analysis suggests they are rigidly hierarchical. They cannot function without their commander. Remove the head and the body dies." The Russian delegate general slowly. "We have assets in position. submarine-launched missiles, orbital debris weapons, ground-based kinetic systems. Combined with American carrier groups and the Chinese satellite network, we can create a window of opportunity. President Morris looked around the table. Every face showed the same determination. Every nation had lost people. Every country had seen its cities burn. They had all suffered together. Now they would fight back together. She smiled, but there was no warmth in the expression, only cold resolve. Then let us show these visitors what humanity does to those who threaten our home. The planning began immediately. For the first time in history, the full military might of Earth would be coordinated in a single operation. Americans worked alongside Russians. Chinese officers shared intelligence with their European counterparts. Old suspicions were set aside. Old hatreds were forgotten. They had come to conquer a divided world. Instead, they had united it. And that united world was about to show them the true meaning of human warfare. Commander sensed something was coming. The human communications had changed. There was less chatter, more encryption. The random resistance attacks had stopped. It felt like the calm before a storm. He was right, but he had no idea how powerful that storm would be. Operation Unity began at 4 in the morning Greenwich Mean Time on a Tuesday. Across 6 continents, human forces launched simultaneous attacks against positions. The coordination was unprecedented in human history. A species that had spent thousands of years fighting itself now moved as a single organism with one purpose and one target. Commander was reviewing casualty reports in his command center when the alarms began. They did not stop. They cascaded across every display, filling the bridge with warnings and alerts that then his officers could process them. Ground bases under attack in North America, orbital platforms losing shields over Asia, communication relays going dark across Europe, supply depots burning in Africa, landing zones overrun in South America. Every position, every asset, every unit was being hit at the same moment. Rushed to his station and stared at the tactical display with growing horror. They are striking everywhere at once. Our forces cannot respond to this many threats simultaneously. We do not have enough reserves. Shouted orders to concentrate around the fleet. He declared the ground forces expendable. He commanded his captains to protect the ships at all costs, because without the ships there could be no retreat. But even as he gave these orders, he knew they came too late. The humans had learned communication protocols. They had broken the encryption that was supposed to be unbreakable. They knew where every unit was positioned. They knew the timing of every patrol and supply convoy. They had been watching and learning and waiting for exactly this moment. In the skies above the Pacific Ocean, Captain Benjamin pushed his modified F-35 fighter jet to its absolute limits. The aircraft had been with reverse-engineered targeting systems. Human engineers had taken alien technology apart and rebuilt it better within weeks. Now Benjamin had lock-on capabilities that no human pilot had ever possessed before. Phoenix Squadron, he announced over his radio, engage at will. 12 human fighters dove toward a formation of interceptors. The aliens had superior ships with plasma weapons and energy shields. They had technology that humanity could barely understand, but they did not have pilots who had trained for aerial combat since childhood. They did not have warriors who had spent their entire lives for exactly this kind of fight. The battle above the ocean was brief and devastating. Human pilots, interceptors at every turn. They attacked from angles the aliens did not expect. They worked together with an instinct born from decades of training exercises against each other. When the last alien fighter fell burning into the sea, the path to orbit was clear. The USS launched its modified missiles. The warheads had been redesigned using everything Hayes and her team had learned about technology. They would not just damage the alien ships, they would cripple them. Across the globe, Russian and Chinese systems launched their own modified weapons. Indian submarines released their payloads. British and French forces added their firepower to the assault. The combined military might of Earth rose toward the heavens in a coordinated barrage that lit up the night sky like a second sun. Watch the projectiles approach on his tactical display. There were hundreds of them, thousands, more missiles than any species had ever launched against the fleet. Point engaged automatically, shooting down dozens of incoming weapons. Plasma cannons vaporized warheads by the score, but more kept coming, an endless stream of primitive rockets that overwhelmed the systems through sheer numbers. The first impacts shook the eternal conquest. Sections of hull vaporized, atmosphere vented into space, crew members died at their stations, secondary explosions rippled through the lower decks as damaged systems failed. "Commander, we must withdraw," grabbed his arm, something no subordinate had ever done. "The fleet cannot sustain this level of damage. We will all die if we stay." On the surface of Earth, humanity pressed its advantage with everything they had. Ground forces found themselves cut off from orbital support. Their communications were. Their reinforcements were not coming. They were alone on a hostile world surrounded by enemies who had spent generations perfecting the art of war. Captain led the assault on the command post in Denver. Her squad had grown since the invasion began. Civilian volunteers had joined them, ordinary people who had learned to fight out of necessity. Teachers and accountants and construction workers now moved through the rubble with military precision, clearing rooms and eliminating resistance. They had all lost someone, they had all seen their homes destroyed, they had all watched friends and family members die. That shared grief had forged them into something stronger than any of them had been alone. When they reached the central chamber of the command post, found an officer surrounded by the bodies of his guards. He raised his weapon with shaking appendages. His mandibles clicked rapidly in what might have been words, but did not care what he was trying to say. She shot him twice in the thorax and stepped over his body without breaking stride. Command post secured, she reported through her radio. Area clear, moving to secondary objectives. Across the planet, similar reports flooded human communication networks. Positions falling in Russia, alien soldiers surrendering in China, equipment captured intact in Europe, major bases overrun in Africa. The invasion that was supposed to take 3 days had turned into a catastrophic defeat for the Empire. Aboard the crippled Eternal Conquest, Commander made a decision that no commander had ever made in the history of their species. He walked to the communication console and opened a channel to the planet below. His translators converted his words into the strange human language. "Human leadership," he said slowly, "I wish to discuss terms." The bridge fell silent. Every officer stared at their commander in disbelief. Surrender, negotiation. These concepts did not exist in military doctrine. They had conquered 17 worlds without ever speaking such words. But those 17 worlds had not been Earth. Those 17 species had not been human. And Commander understood now that everything his people believed about warfare had been wrong. The response came within minutes, a human voice, calm and controlled. "Commander, this is President Morris of the United States of America, speaking on behalf of the unified nations of Earth. We accept your request for negotiation. A shuttle will be permitted to land at the following coordinates. You will come alone with minimal escort. Any hostile action will result in the immediate destruction of your remaining fleet." Closed his eyes, minimal escort, immediate destruction. The human spoke of annihilating the remnants of his fleet as casually as he might discuss dinner plans. He had invaded a world of monsters, and now he would beg those monsters for mercy. "Understood," he replied. "I will comply with your terms." He turned to prepare my shuttle and begin calculating a retreat course. Whatever happens in this negotiation, the fleet must survive to warn the Empire. Warn them of what, Commander? Looked at the blue planet on his view screen, the beautiful, terrible world that had destroyed everything he believed about the universe. Warn them to never come here again. The negotiations took place in the ruins of the United Nations headquarters in New York City. The building had been damaged during the early bombardments but still stood as a symbol of human unity. It seemed fitting that the fate of 2 species would be decided there. Commander descended from his shuttle under a flag of truce. His personal guard had been reduced to 4 soldiers who walked with the nervous energy of prey animals. They had conquered worlds. They had crushed civilizations. Now they flinched at every shadow, expecting death from any direction. President Morris met him at the entrance. She was flanked by representatives from every major nation on Earth. Russian generals stood beside American admirals. Chinese diplomats walked with European ministers. They had been enemies for generations, but now they presented a unified front that found deeply unsettling. Morris showed no fear as she approached the alien commander, no hesitation. She looked at him with the same calm expression she might use for any adversary across a negotiating table. "Commander," she said simply, "welcome to Earth." Studied the human leader carefully. She was small by standards, fragile-looking with soft skin and no natural weapons. Nothing about her physical form suggested a warrior, yet she had helped coordinate the of an entire planet. She had made decisions that killed thousands of his soldiers, and she showed no remorse or uncertainty about any of it. "Your species is remarkable," admitted. He saw no point in deception now. "In all our conquests, we have never encountered resistance like this. You have destroyed more of our forces in 1 month than we have lost in the previous century." Morris slightly, "We have a saying, what does not kill us makes us stronger. Your invasion united our planet in ways that would have taken us centuries to achieve on our own. For that, I suppose we owe you thanks." The negotiations lasted 3 days. They were held in a conference room that had once hosted debates about trade agreements and border disputes. Now the fate of two civilizations was decided within its walls. The terms were simple. The fleet would withdraw from the Sol system immediately and never return. They would provide complete technical specifications for their propulsion systems, communication arrays, and defensive technologies as reparations for the destruction they had caused. They would share star charts and information about other species in the galaxy. In exchange, humanity would not pursue them into space, not yet. Signed the agreement with a heavy heart. He was ending his career in disgrace. His name would be remembered as the commander who failed against primitives, but at least his remaining soldiers would survive. "You understand what this means," he said as he prepared to depart. "You have revealed yourselves to the galaxy. They are not the only power among the stars. Others will come, others who may be more powerful than us." President Morris slowly, her expression did not change. "We are counting on it." His mandibles clicked with confusion. "You want others to come?" "Commander, your invasion gave us something we have never had before, a common enemy. We have spent our entire history fighting each other because we had no one else to fight. Now we do." She paused and something cold entered her eyes. "You have given us purpose." The fleet departed Earth's orbit on a Thursday afternoon. Across the planet, humans watched the alien vessels disappear into the darkness between stars. There were no celebrations in the streets, no triumphant speeches from politicians. There was only quiet determination and the beginning of new work. Dr. Hayes began construction on the first human interstellar drive the following morning. She used technology as her foundation, but her team was already improving upon it. Within a year, they would have something better than anything the alien empire had ever built. General Webb established the United Earth Force, the first military organization in human history to represent the entire species. Old national armies were not disbanded, but they now served under a unified command structure. The petty conflicts that had divided humanity for millennia seemed pointless now. There were real enemies among the stars. Captain was promoted and assigned to train the next generation of soldiers. These would not be warriors who fought for individual nations. They would be defenders of Earth itself. She accepted the position without hesitation. She had lost too many friends to ever stop fighting. Engineers in 12 countries started construction on humanity's first warships capable of leaving the solar system. The designs were ambitious. The timelines were aggressive, but humans had always accomplished impossible things when properly motivated. Humanity had spent its entire existence for extinction. They had built weapons to destroy themselves. They had fought wars that served no purpose beyond survival. They had practiced killing each other for so long that it had become part of their nature. Now that training had a new application. The stars were full of species who had grown soft from easy conquests and peaceful expansion. They had forgotten what war truly meant. They had forgotten what it cost and what it demanded. They would learn. On the bridge of the departing Eternal Conquest, Commander composed his final report to the High Command. He chose his words carefully because they would shape his empire's policy toward this sector for generations. Earth is classified as quarantine level maximum, he dictated. The species designated human represents an existential threat to any civilization that engages them in conflict. They are not to be contacted, traded with, or provoked under any circumstances. Any vessel that enters their system should consider itself lost. He paused and looked back at the blue planet one final time. It was so beautiful from this distance, so peaceful-looking, so deceptive. "The humans have a concept in their mythology called hell," he continued. "It is a place of eternal punishment and suffering. I now understand this concept because we found it. We found hell and we were fortunate to escape from it." The message transmitted across the communication network. It spread to every corner of their empire within days. Other species intercepted it. They translated it and added their own warnings to the growing consensus. The third planet of an unremarkable yellow star in the Orion Arm was not to be approached. The humans lived there, and the galaxy would tremble at what those humans would become. 5 years after the invasion, the first human warship left the solar system. It was called the Endurance, and it carried a crew of 500 men and women from every nation on Earth. They were explorers and scientists and soldiers. They were ambassadors of a species that had been forged in the fire of constant conflict. Captain stood on the bridge as the ship accelerated toward the stars. She thought about everyone she had lost during the invasion. She thought about the friends who had died fighting for their world. She thought about the future that humanity was building from the ashes of near extinction. They had come to conquer Earth. Instead, they had awakened something that had been sleeping for thousands of years, a species of warriors who had finally found a worthy purpose for their endless capacity for violence. Humanity was coming to the stars, and heaven help anyone foolish enough to threaten them again.